And I would like to introduce the next speaker, who is going to connect online from Norway. Kate is the only speaker we're going to have in the room with us today, and I'd like to thank him for coming. We're going to move on to our speaker from Norway. The first international presentation at this Egurtek Forum, this first day at the Egurtek Forum, and with the Mork-Ulnes Architect Studio. And apart from having an office in Norway, they have another office in San Francisco, California. I'd like to welcome you, Casper. Established in 2005, the study combines the Scandinavian utility with the enthusiastic California spirit as they define themselves. The scale of their work varies from master plans to residential concepts of 100 square meters. I would like to hand over to Casper, who's on the screen now, born in Norway, but who has also lived in Italy, Scotland, United States, and has provided a broad perspective to his professional career. In 2013, he was selected by the National Museum of Norway as one of the most outstanding young Norwegian architects in an exhibition of architects under 40, and the California Board of the American Institute of Architectures appointed the Norwegian studios one of the best emerging talents in California. In 2019, Mork-Ulnes Architects was nominated for the Miss Van der Rohe Award from the European Union. Casper, good morning from Bilbao. Welcome to the Egurtek Forum.
Welcome. It's a pleasure to pass on your presentation, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the very generous introduction, and good morning from Oslo. I'd also like to thank Egurtek for inviting me to give this lecture this morning. I also wanted to thank our team at Mork-Ulnes Architects. As we are a small office, we are really an office that works as a collective of collaborators. As you mentioned, our office is based in San Francisco in California, San Francisco and Norway, and we're part of a global context, and we have projects under construction currently on 3 continents. But we really also try to have a global mindset, but also a very local mindset, which hopefully you will see in some of the projects I will show you today. Our roots are very much in Norway and California, and it's the cross-pollination of these contexts that are very much a strong influence. That said, since today we're at a wood conference, I'm going to focus the presentation with an emphasis on the use of wood in our buildings. And today I'll be showing you 4 houses that are built out of wood that are located in the landscape, both in the United States and in Norway. I'll be discussing the use of wood as well as the relationship that these buildings have to the natural and cultural context and cultural landscape, both inside and out, as well as set the general context of our work. I grew up in this wooden house on our family farm just outside of Oslo, and my father still lives there today. I've always been drawn to wood as a building material, and I think part of the reason is really my upbringing on our family farm. The timbers from this house, when it was a small cabin initially, are from the 1600s, and it's been renovated through many generations. But some of my earliest memories are from this house in particular, and also all the other houses that are on the farm, since they're all wood construction. I remember lying on the floor, on the wooden floor there as a child, drawing and playing, and that's really my first memory of the smell of wood, even though it was a very old wood and it had a very strong olfactory quality that still sticks with me today. This is a painting done by my mother of my grandfather coming back from a day working in the forest. I think it's from the mid-50s. My mother painted it later. It shows my grandfather bringing wood logs through the snow and out from the forest. I have very fond memories of working with my grandfather in the forest myself, felling the trees in the wintertime and then planting the seeds in the summertime in the forest. And it's not just the social aspects of being with my grandfather, but also the taking in the forest atmosphere through our senses that I have very vivid memories of. So for me, wood has very strong physiological effects and qualities as well that have stuck with me since childhood. And it's olfactory, it's visual, it's tactile, it's even auditory. And these are all qualities that are unique to wood. And I think that you can bring these qualities into architecture by using wood. With wood, there's even the sense that even after it's cut into pieces, you still somehow feel that the material is alive. The patina of it changes through time as the sun bleaches it or as the wood gets worn and used over time. And it's also one of the few building materials that's also warm to the touch as well. So it's my experience and belief that the way that wood changes during its life, that over the course of time, wood can really add a very poetic dimension to architecture. In Norway, our buildings often exist in resistance to the harsh environment we have in the northern hemisphere. These are two storehouses that are from my cousin's farm just outside of Lillehammer. The oldest of the two is from 1715. They're, in my mind, an example of cultural knowledge that's been built up over thousands of years. These storehouses, I believe, have some of the similar qualities of the stone grain storehouses that I've also seen in Spain, in northern Spain. I think you call them horeos, pardon my pronunciation. In Norway, they're usually 2 or 3 stories, and they actually store valuables on the upper story. And clothes, and then the food was typically stored on the lower level. So in this case, the family who depended on these storehouses would have starved if the buildings didn't perform through the winter time. So with moisture and rodents really being the biggest enemies, there are stilts underneath the buildings that raise the building above the ground. And also the stairs are usually always pulled away from the building to prevent rodents from entering the building. The roof configuration is also very simple. You see it's a gabled roof, and the doors are in the front so that you're mitigating danger from sliding snow, and sliding icicle comes on the side of the building instead of the front of the building. The exterior is always usually coated in something called pine tar, extracted from pine trees, which seals and protects the wood envelope. This is the same thing that they did in stave church construction, which some of you might be familiar with, which are structures in Norway that are over 1,000 years old, or 1,000 years old or so, and are still standing. So you could argue that superfluous architectural elements might present a liability in this type of setting. So these timber structures endure partially because they were really pared down to the most essential architectural elements. Other than the spire on top of one of the buildings, there's really an economy of means to these structures, and the main effort was really spent on function and on making these buildings last. So it's really about practical building and place. So I would say that a functionally driven architecture has become integral to the Norwegian vernacular because of tried and true models like these types of buildings. As I said, I was going to show you 4 projects today. All of them are quite modest in size and display a certain economy to them as well. This is the first project. It's a humble, small ski cabin about an hour north of Oslo. It's located in an area of forest, some farms, and also other cabins. It's, as I said, quite small. It's 85 square meters, the main structure, with a 15 square meter annex structure. And the building is really placed on a flat shelf on the site to minimize disturbance to the site. As a site strategy, we also needed to consider the views from the site as well as the program, but we also wanted to address the climatic setting as well. While it's in central Norway, the summer and the winter climate is very contrasting and relatively rough, as you might imagine, in the northern hemisphere. So as you see in this aerial photographs, the plan is sort of a cruciform configuration that concentrates the snow sliding into two directions to keep outdoor terraces and entryways clear of falling snow and ice. So the orientation of the building on site therefore really creates two outdoor sheltered spaces, one which is in the lower left part of your screen, which is the morning gathering area, and the other, which is on the right side of the screen, is the outdoor gathering area for the afternoons, for the evening sun. And that's really to make use of the limited solar exposure that we have in this type of climate. As you might know, we have very little sun for 6 months of the year, and then lots of sunshine in the winter. So we try to make the most of the sunlight that we have. Additionally, the site has views in 4 directions: towards the lake, towards the forest, and towards the hillside, and up to the sky. So as a site strategy, we designed really with the views in mind, pointing the wings in the direction of the views. Here you see the sheltered outdoor space that I was referring to for morning gatherings, here used for breakfast in the summertime. And here shown in early winter without much snow, but the winter emerging. And this is the other side, which is the main entry side, and this is the afternoon gathering area. And you can see how the roof is split and shifted in order to shed the snow and the ice away from the 2 terraces. The wings branch out to nestle into the landscape, and equally important to give privacy to the different spatial programs in each one of the 4 wings. And you get a sense here in this image of how the wings of the house are engaging with the landscape. This drawing is of a traditional Norwegian cabin from the mid-1800s, and if you look at the plan on the bottom left, you see there's a central fireplace that really forms the heart of the building, and it creates 2 different spatial zones within the cabin, one for living and one for sleeping. And similarly, the plan for this project is organized around these functional cores that are placed in the center of the wings that allow the functions to be very compactly concentrated into zones, which subsequently allow the space to flow freely around and above them. So they really become spatial organizers and organize the experience of experiencing and being in the cabin itself. And this configuration also really helps with the economy of the space. At 85 square meters, here shown, can sleep 12 people. And the spatial arrangement of these cores have the ability to allow an expansive openness, even on a relatively small floor plan. The cabin feels quite large, also with the high ceilings and the way in which we have manipulated the light and the openings to the exterior, allowing the wings and the zones to flow freely around the cabin and really connect to the exterior as well. And the center of the plan really becomes the hub for family life. This also shows the economy of materials. We're using humble, simple materials like birch plywood and concrete floors. And we are still trying to create intimate spaces, even though there's an inherent openness in the floor plan itself. And the cabin really becomes part of the landscape in which it resides, and the nature flows in and out and around the cabin, and really attempts to connect to the essential character of the natural landscape and of this particular place. The exterior is clad in untreated Norwegian heart pine. I believe it's also referred to as ore pine in English. That includes the doors and windows as well as the roof. And the functional roof profile here, combined with the open-ended pinwheel plan, produces a prismatic geometry that doesn't really have a singular presence on site. So you never really perceive the building in its totality. It seems to change in size as you look at it from the different angles on the site. And this has also the effect of diminishing the scale of the house, and also softens the impact on the landscape. And here you see as the building material is starting to age. This is a photos a little bit older as the material starts to gray. And another image here giving you an impression of the surrounding natural landscape, and the building also starting to age, and we're hoping it will withstand the test of time. This next project is a bit of a larger project on the other side of the world, 5,000 miles away, 8,000 kilometers from here. It is located in an alpine ski area in Northern California at the elevation of 2,500 meters above sea level. It's about 350 square meters, so over almost 4 times the size of the previous cabin. Just about a 3-hour drive from San Francisco, for those of you who are familiar with California. It's a mountain retreat for 3 generations, versus the previous cabin was really just for one family and their friends. And this house is to be used both in summer and winter season, and the building is really tucked into the back of the site to nestle into the forest with the towering Jeffrey pines that are surrounding on all sides, that grow up to 50 meters in height. And the house is located in an area of extreme snowfall. You can get from 10 to 20 meters of snow falling each season. And locally, we refer to the snow as Sierra cement, because it's very, very heavy and it's very dense. And this happens because the warm storms are crossing the Pacific and then drop very heavy snow on the Sierra Nevada mountain range. So it's really essential that the building takes the snow into consideration when you're building in this area. This is the local shop not far from the cabin. So based on the alpine chalet type, the house is lifted on concrete legs to protect it from the large amount of snow that comes in the wintertime. The program is stacked on 3 levels. The entry level is the area where the skis are kept and where you enter also. And then bedroom level is the second level, and the top level is the public zones with living areas where the family gathers. This is a traditional Norwegian solution to deal with high snow. There's many different ways but this is a particular example where you see there are very little windows on the base or the plinth of the building, and the rooms that are required to have windows are lifted to the second level, And you also see a stairway that's designed and built as a way to mitigate the impacts of snow in the winter and also icicles. And you see our contemporary interpretation of those functional issues to contend with. This is a photo in the summer. All of the rooms, like bathrooms and closets and so forth, are all on the northern side of the building, so that we could have the smallest windows towards the north to minimize thermal heat loss from the building. And this is the same view in the summer, in the winter. 2 years ago, the snow was even actually higher. It went up to the middle of the windows of the second story. And this is taken actually relatively early on in the winter season. And here you get a reading of the concrete plinth, how that functions, and how the concrete plinth is built so that it can be robust and sit exposed to the snow for an extended period of time. And on the west and south facades, we have large, deep overhangs to protect the window openings from the summer sun, which is very strong in California, and also to protect the balconies from the snow in the wintertime. Pine tar, which I mentioned earlier in the presentation, is a sticky material produced by high temperature carbonization of pine wood, and the tar is a key element in preserving these stave churches that you see on the left from the weather. This one is a photo of one that I took recently in an area outside of Lillehammer. It was built in 1220. It's one of, I believe, 25 or 30 remaining stave churches in Norway from that era. And you see on the photo on the right is taken on the north facade, which gets the least exposure from the sun, and it has developed this very, very thick patina versus the photo on the left you see is more where it gets more southern exposure. But it develops this beautiful patina, living sort of patina over time as the material is applied. Here you see the pine tar on our building, just with one application, and it will obviously patina over the years as new tar is usually added every 10 years or so. In the exterior cladding material, we used local wood called Western red cedar, which in itself is also very hardy and an excellent material to use on exterior of buildings. And you also get a sense of the protected stairway and the concrete plinth, both elements that are designed to deal with abundant snow in the wintertime. A move that's functional, formal, but also really a direct nod to the historic context and techniques that we try to learn from in our architecture. And a lifted building also really allows you to feel like you're sitting among the treetops, just like a tree house. The clients always tell us this is what they like the most about the house, that it feels like a tree house. And while it relies on the intelligence of Norwegian tradition, it also incorporates a very distinctive California modernist indoor-outdoor way of living as well. So it's both introvert, which is more Norwegian, and at the same time extrovert as well. And that allows the interior and exterior really to connect. And here you see it in the winter time. And the interior is Douglas fir, which is also local wood, and which is coated here with white oil, both in the ceiling and on the floor. And here another view of the main living space. You see how it connects out to the treetops, and it has an open plan configuration between two vaulted ceilings that are capped with roof windows, demarcating two smaller spaces more akin to the scale of an alpine cabin. And then the two large roof windows punctuate the gathering areas and provides ample natural light into the space, while the west-facing wall is glazed to connect to the treetops. So again, it's really a nod to a reference to both Norwegian and California traditions in many ways. This building is located in the high desert climate in Oregon, which is the state north of California. It's an area with really dry, hot summers and cold winters that can also get quite a bit of snow, but not as much as the previous project. It's a flat site and it has views to large mountains beyond. But perhaps more importantly, the site was formerly a forest, and in 2003 there was a very large fire that burned over 90,000 acres of trees in this area, which became in many ways a driver for the client in the brief that they gave us to design the house. The project's currently under construction. You can see the foundation here, and the red piping is the radiant floor used for heating and cooling. And then on the top of the screen, you see the cross-laminated timber panels lying on the ground, ready to be put into be installed. And as I mentioned earlier, the materials were very much a driver from the onset. The clients wished to have a metal roof for snow and maintenance reasons, and the cross-laminated timber construction system was an important thing for them as well. And then the exterior material, which is shosugiban, Japanese technique of charred wood siding, is a reference to the history of the site, of it having burned in 2003. And in the floor plan, you see there are some formal similarities to the first project, both in plan and in the roof form. And we see this project as a progression from a single pinwheel or cruciform plan to more of a woven courtyard typology. It also has greater indoor-outdoor connection with larger windows because of the climate, being in Oregon, and also being able to have more direct physical access to the open and the closed courtyards, as well as the landscape beyond. But the plan is really designed to be able to flow around the different zones of the house, a house almost without corridors like the first project I showed. And the courtyards are used as a way to organize the spaces and shield from hot summer sun and the winter winds. Here again, the different wings are reaching out into the landscape, creating a wider range of spatial types and program functions. Courtyard is really the hub of the house, creating more private spaces around the courtyards. And here's an early rendering showing the shosugiban siding. Again, the roof form has some similarities with the first project, but multiplied over a woven plan rather than a pinwheel or a cruciform plan. And this results in something that's morphologically unique and creates varied spatial experiences in each one of the various wings. Although it's a strong form, it also has transparency with clear views through the buildings, through the volumes itself, and also through the courtyards running north, south, and east, west. So you can see through the buildings and through the building from several vantage points. And the building also has a very different presence on all sides, pursuing a sort of interplay with perception. And the house again evades a singular reading. You can't really understand the whole house, all of its parts and how they weave together without moving around the house and inside the house. And the dramatic slope of the roof is functional for shedding the snow, but it also has the benefit of introducing generous ceiling heights in all the different rooms and wings. And since each room is the same height, but the footprint is different, you get a range of spatial qualities as well. by just tweaking one of the variables. Here are the cross-laminated timber panels being installed. They were produced by what I believe is one of the first factories in the United States to produce cross-laminated timber. It's in the neighboring, close by state of Montana by a company called SmartLam. And the cross-laminated timber on the interior will be left raw due to the clients being open to a more elemental aesthetic. However, much attention was also paid to detailing and hiding the plumbing and electrical and so forth to create an all CLT or all wooden interior expression. And there you see the punched openings, the windows that will connect to the landscape and through to the courtyards, and get a sense of how the light might be and the views out to the landscape. And also from room to room. And I believe, yeah, these are the laminated timber doors about to be installed. And you might be familiar with the Japanese heat treatment of wood called shoshugiban, but again, this material was chosen by the owners as a reference to the fire. And here from a recent site visit, you can see the cladding starting to be installed on the exterior in combination with the metal roof. And then the building, again, another view, and we're expecting to complete this building next month. Lastly, we have a project that we call the Skigard cabin. This is in Norway. It's located on a mountaintop at about 1,000 meters above sea level, and it's overlooking a cultural landscape of farms dotted in the valley below. It's actually in the Alpine ski resort that hosted the 1994 Olympics in Lillehammer, where they had the downhill skiing events. So it's a relatively new resort. And this gives an aerial view to set the context. In the summertime, the area is primarily really used for leisure, but also importantly as grazing land for sheep and cows, and by the local farmers who come from the valley below and bring the animals up to the pastures to graze. And in the wintertime, it's primarily used as a ski area for both cross-country and alpine skiing. And the site has two primary views, one to the right, which is over the lake and down far into the valley and cultural landscape in the valley itself, and then the forest and a marsh land to the left-hand side of the site. And the cabin is built right at the top of the tree line, right before the harsh mountain terrain takes over. While this is only 1,000 meters above sea level, since we're in Norway, the conditions actually get very tough and quite cold and windy, even at this elevation. And you can kind of see by the mountains in the background that are above the tree line. So it was very important for us in this project to save the existing topography, and there were also some old animal paths that we wanted to maintain. So our first move was really the thought of lifting the building above the terrain to try to maintain the terrain as existing. And this is also a strategy very similar to common Norwegian historical approaches, having these elevated buildings that straddle the topography. On the image of the left, you see a very typical Norwegian farm that the way in which the buildings relate to the landscape, instead of excavating into the landscape, they straddle the landscape. And also all the buildings have grass roofs, which is traditional as well. And then on the right, you see the Norwegian Hereo, or the grain storehouse, which is shown also raised above the ground plane. And then on the section to the right, you see the stairway being removed from the main volume, sort of as a floating separate staircase element. Section of the building, it's supported by 45 columns, and the cabin hovers above the ground from about 25 centimeters to 1.5 meters, almost 2 meters at the other end. And we replaced the traditional log legs or the stacked stones with prefabricated cross-laminated timber columns that touch the ground very lightly. They sit on very delicate steel feet that you see in the bottom of the section that are either drilled into the rock surface below where we found rock, or there are small concrete piers where we did not reach the rock surface. So it has this delicate way of engaging with the landscape. And this diagram illustrates the assembly of the cabin. The roof at the top there you see is overgrown with the same native grasses found in the ground plain below, and also century-old Norwegian buildings. There are 4 frustum ceilings with roof windows that punctuate and that divide the cabin into 4 separate spaces, with the intention of making it feel like 4 small cabins in a row instead of one larger space. And there's always opposing windows as you're walking up and down the building, so you have a view on either side as you're moving through the building. So every room really has a view. And then, as I said, the 45 cross-laminated timber columns that were all pre-cut by CNC, and they sit on the outside of the building to support the volume that's actually sleeved onto the inside of the columns. And finally, there's the wood log skin that sleeves over the columns themselves. And this shows the existing entry path from the parking area leading to the entry. The entry is a large punch out in the building, which creates the entry space and hints at the visual permeability that runs through the entire house. The plan is in also some ways follows a typical local historical precedence known as a Trønderlån, this specific typology, regional typology. It's a very simple plan typology, and it's becomes a very long, narrow house with a central circulation path, and you always have openings opposing each other, both as you're walking through the building and on your left and the right. These buildings were typically built over many centuries, so you basically built one house first, then you added the next room and then the next room through generations as the family grew and as there was the economic means to do it as well. So it was usually evolved one volume at a time. And here you can see the rooms are flanked on either side of the elongated house. The intention being that you can see through the house at all times, connecting to the surrounding nature from every room as you're walking up and down the building. This again was the main purpose, so you can always experience the site from each individual space. The circulation path opens up onto this very open, lofty feeling space, yet it's quite intimate because it's relatively modest in size and plan. And again, the arrangement of the plan allows you every space a private panorama to the exterior and a view the opposite direction down to the bedrooms, always giving you a view out to the landscape as you move through the separate cabin volumes that are all tied together on this central axial pathway. And you get a sense of the sectional quality of the building too, of the ceiling, which is punctuated with a roof window. And here's a detailed photo of the roof window. This photo is taken in the wintertime, covered in snow, which gives a very different, more diffuse Nordic light, and it really affects the space versus in the summer. It's a much more brighter and has more color in the light. And it was desired again to provide a clear panoramic crop to the views for each room. This is towards the trees and the marsh in the summer. And this is the other direction down into the valley in the wintertime. And from the main bedrooms with the mountains in the far background. Here you also get a sense of the detailing around the window opening, where it's detailed in such a way that it creates a shadow play with the rough timber sticking just slightly beyond the more rigid crop for the window on the interior. And at the same time, we're aimed to create more intimate moments in combination with the window openings, whether they're large or small, and the Nordic light moving across the room at all times of the day, whether the short winter days, as in this photo, or the longer summer days. And there was a desire to keep things simple and to use a single material throughout the interior. So the bathrooms were even constructed of wood, as you see in the image on the left. And we also strived for precise detailing and local craft skills, as you see on the right. These are the refrigerator poles. So all the interior materials are the same Norwegian spruce wood, except in the sauna, where we used aspen to prevent the resin from seeping from the spruce in the high temperatures. And the walls are all insulated with blown-in wood fiber insulation. Then they're covered on the exterior with wood fiber windproof paneling before the last layer, which is the quartered log cladding. And this is a photo of a neighboring summer farm. The exterior cladding was really borrowed from this local animal fencing, used to keep animals contained at the summer pastures. And they're made of quartered timbers of smaller trees, or the tops of bigger trees that can't be used as a building material. And this is called Skigard, hence the name of the project. And the choice of the building cladding resulted in a diagonal transparent skin over the columns. The structure is still visible behind the skin, excuse me, giving a subtle expression of the wood structure behind the cladding. And you get a sense of the building gently hovering over the rocks in the ground plane and receding amongst the birch trees here in the summertime. And this traditional corner detail, which is how it's also applied in the animal fencing. And the fencing was built by the same craftspeople that built the rest of the cabin, but the skin was built using just a chainsaw, and whereas the inside was much, much more delicately done. So it was very interesting to see the contrast of the craftspeople doing the work. But the intention was to give a much rougher appearance on the exterior, whereas we have a more delicate experience on the interior. And here you see the exterior really coming alive with the snow and ice, and early winter afternoon with a Nordic light gently illuminating the building. And the winter when snow covered, as it blends with the snow coming down from above. And the raised volume to allow the horizon and terrain to flow under the building, and allows the sheep and other animals to continue to use the building site for grazing during the long summer months. It also provides a refuge, of course, for the animals for inclement weather as well. And here you see the traditional stoop stairway used to gather in the summertime and in the spring. I was going to show you a very quick, hopefully, if it loads, a short film of the cabin. This movie is shot by Juan Buenavides, who's an architect and a filmmaker from Mexico who came to visit the cabin. You get the sense of the entry portal, which on a clear day really frames the view down into the valley and really frames the nature beyond. This is the other side of the cabin now towards the ski area. As you see the other cabins and the ski runs. And the trees are really snow-laden. and the roofs are covered in snow, but beneath the snow, it's the grass, the natural grass, which are traditional peat roofs, which we've been using in Scandinavia for since prehistoric times as a way to insulate our buildings. And the roof really helps soften also the otherwise rigid rectilinear geometry of the cabin. And here you see the cabin camouflages itself with the trees, with the snow settling on the roof and on the siding. And in these images, you get a sense of the indoor-outdoor feeling, connecting the interior to the exterior with seamless detailing. Yet it also gives a sense that it's a refuge from the harsh elements. You get to see the precise detailing of the cabinets and carpentry coming together with all the joints where the ceiling meets the walls and the floors engage with the windows. It was very much a collaborative process with the local craftspeople to have this cabin executed. And finally, in the image in the summertime, the roof planted with a local seed is now growing in, and when that grass is animated by the wind, it's quite beautiful and really stands in contrast with the otherwise linear wooden volume below. For us, these projects obviously exemplify the synthesis of our Californian openness and experimentation maybe, and the more refined Norwegian straightforwardness and pragmatism. And but I hope you've enjoyed the talk and seeing some of our wood buildings. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation of buildings that have taken us as far as the United States. It's a luxury to listen to you and to understand how you go from tradition to modernity with such an interesting warmness and quality. Regarding questions related to tradition, the audience is asking, in those pavilions, those traditional Norwegian constructions, there are eaves that you no longer use in your current building. Could you explain the criteria you apply to eliminate from your architecture the eaves that are so characteristic of the traditional Norwegian buildings we've seen, in the same way that you use other interesting references that you've explained regarding the characteristics of popular architecture?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's I guess it's partially by chance that the four projects I chose today don't have the eaves. We do actually have several projects that we have built and are doing that have eaves, but we you know, in the first cabin, the Mylla cabin, we used the architecture to provide the shelter, to shed the snow, to shed the icicles away from you know, the entry areas. So there, you know, by the use of the architecture, we were able to not use eaves in that project. So I think every project is different, and we have a, you know, all of our projects, we try to make all our projects unique, and so they all have maybe a little bit of a different attitude towards traditional architecture. The last project, for example, actually what the eave is the, I believe it's 55 centimeters. The skin projects out 55 centimeters from the glazed opening, therefore eliminating the need for a traditional eaves, but in a sense the skin actually acts as the eave. So just to illustrate, in each project we have a way in which to deal with the natural circumstances. But again, each project is different, so we try to, we're always trying to reinvent ourselves, maybe. So we're always trying to find different ways to deal with the local problems.
Thank you, Casper. We're also asked in that little pavilion, that little building we saw at the beginning, they ask whether the windows open in the projects.
Yes, not all the windows open, but at least half of the windows open. But the larger windows do not open in that particular project, but the smaller windows do.
Regarding the subject of opening windows, can you briefly explain what the strategy is, the active strategy you apply in your projects, the minimum installations that you consider in your projects, basically, the minimum amenities?
The minimum amenities, I think, I guess it depends what you're referring to, but if you're referring to building code or laws, we have, we try to make our projects as sort of dumbed down and simple as possible with regards to ventilation and things like that. So, instead of relying on technology, we use natural ventilation. So you might have seen in some of the images, in the bathrooms and all the living rooms, there was natural ventilation, very subtly detailed into the wood skin. So yeah, we tend to gravitate maybe less towards technology and more towards simple solutions, and in particular when we're doing these types of houses that I showed today, which are more cabin type constructions.
Thank you, Casper. And finally, you have an office in California and an office in Norway. Is the client different when considering wood construction in California and Norway? Do you feel a difference when you're asked for a project? Or tell us a little bit about the difference between these two parts of the world. If there are any, maybe there aren't.
Yes, yeah, no, there's a big difference. There's very, very big difference. I would say in Norway, our clients tend to be just like the architecture references I showed. They're more pragmatic. It's more about how the building is going to function, how it's going to be maintained, what it's going to cost. That sort of attitude. Whereas in California, and I think this is inherent with the California culture, they're more open, in general, more open. They're more open to experimentation. And I think that's just very much a cultural thing that comes from the clients. When it relates to wood construction, I would say in Norway, in many ways, it's expected to use wood, although it's not always a given. In California, I would say we do have quite a lot of clients that come to us because of our Nordic origins and the way in which we use wood. So I think already some clients seek us out for that. But that's not always the case. And, as it's, wood is not the only material we use, but it is the material that I am most fond of. So we always do put our case in and try to do what we can to convince our California clients to use wood. It's a renewable resources. I don't have to lecture you of all the benefits of using wood. I'm sure you know them, but But I would say the big challenge that we're just facing, which we might be facing in other parts of the world also soon, is wood with regards to fire. As some of you have probably seen the devastating fires that have occurred in California over the last several years, and you know, it seems like this is something that's going to be occurring elsewhere. I think that is a big challenge, and so how can we continue to use wood construction safely? We obviously know that cross-laminated timber, you know, we've been able to convince our clients by data to show that cross-laminated timber can actually do much better than steel in situations of a fire. So there are things that, you know, we need to work on and that the wood industry needs to work on. It's not, I don't think it's just going to be a problem in California and Australia. I remember Portugal a few years ago. And so I think it's something that it's an interesting challenge for us. You know, how can we continue to do wood exteriors? How can it be detailed? What is the dimensionality of the lumber, treatment of lumber, et cetera, et cetera. So, but sorry, that's my long answer to a short question.
No, te agradezco de verdad tu experiencia.
No, thank you for your experience with two different scenarios in the use of wood and the customers' feelings towards wood. And if I may ask a final question that's just come in. As you know, we're receiving questions via streaming. They congratulate you on your presentation, I would also like to tell you. And regarding heat and climate comfort, they ask whether you can tell us about the preset temperatures are for heating or cooling in your projects. What inside and outside temperatures do you consider to design that comfortable home?
That's an interesting question because we use different systems for California and for Norway with regards to heating, and I think that's the one thing, you know, one item where technology really plays a part, and where we use technologies in the heating systems. In the California, it's typically radiant heating, which is floor heating in the floor, which is heated water from gas typically. And in Norway, it's electric heat in the floors mostly, even though we're trying to move more to hydronic or water heat because it is more efficient, but because of the you know, hydroelectric power that we have in Norway, electricity is still thought of as a quite a sustainable resource. But as far as the actual heat temperature, you know, that's always gauged by the client. It's always decided by the client because, you know, everything is on an automatic you know, temperature system, and you know, they simply use their telephones to set the temperatures.
Thank you very much, Casper. Nos alegra mucho haberte tenido.
Thank you very much, Casper. We're very pleased to have had you with us at Egurtek. If you wish, you can also follow the presentations which we're streaming. So I invite you to continue to build and explain your wooden constructions, and we would like you to come back to Bilbao in person to tell us more about your architecture. Thank you very much, Casper.